Good morning. I'm sharing this morning from the Gospel of Luke, the 15th chapter, verses 1 through 9, and I'm using Eugene Peterson's translation called The Message. By this time, a lot of men and women of doubtful reputation were hanging around Jesus, listening intently. The Pharisees and religious scholars were not pleased at all. They growled, "He's taken in sinners. He eats meals with them," treating them like old friends. Their grumbling triggered this story. Suppose one of you had 100 sheep and lost one. Wouldn't you leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the lost one until you found him? When found, you could make sure you would put it across your shoulders, rejoicing. And when you got home, you'd call your friends and neighbors, saying, "Celebrate with me. I found my lost sheep." Count on it. There is more joy in heaven over one sinner rescued from life rather than over 99 good people who don't need any rescue. You know, Jesus, when he started out his life, he spent 30 years getting ready before he started his ministry. And I'm sure during that 30 years he came up with a lot of ideas that he wanted to express to his followers when he had some, and he would want to share with the world. But just how was he going to do it? That was the big problem. What kind of method was he going to use to describe and to tell his truth? Homer had the Iliad. King Solomon used the Proverbs as a way of doing it, and so there's all kinds of ways. But there was one way that he had given thought to, and that was the use of a parable. Now, parables are stories. They're stories that are told, and the idea is that in that story there's a universal truth. There's an idea that really is part of that idea. And so when the story is told, the story allows the idea to come to you without being confronted straight on with it. Because most of the time when we have a fault in our lives, or somebody wants to make a suggestion, if they're hard-nosed about it and tell us right up front, we can become obnoxious and not want to follow it. So Jesus was struggling with how was he going to express his truth, and he decided that, I guess, he did decide to use a method called the parable. Now, what got it started with that might well have been the story of King David. You remember King David, he was looking out his window one time and he saw a lady, and he decided that lady was desirous, and he went through the act of getting her, and then he found out that her husband was a soldier, and he tried to cover it all up because she was now pregnant, and so he went through all kinds of shenanigans, and eventually he even had to send this man to the front lines and tell the generals to leave him out there alone so that he would be killed. And that's the way kings did things. They did them that way, and so it turned out that when David got there, that's what he did. Well, Nathan was the prophet, and the prophet was told by God to go to David and tell him about this and get him straightened out. Well, Nathan was pretty sharp, and he knew that if he confronted him direct on, that King David would probably get angry and probably get more obstinate, and he probably wouldn't do anything. So what he did, he went to King David and he said, "I want to tell you about an incident that happened recently. There was a man people who work on a farm, and they have only one animal. It's a ewe, and they love that animal. It's just like it's one of their family, and they just love that animal so much. Well, the owner of the farm had some friends show up unexpectedly, and he needed to be able to provide them with meal. And rather than go out and find one of his own, he took the ewe of the poor family, and he killed it, and they ate it, and they enjoyed it. And King David said, Well, and he said, what would you do with somebody like that? Nathan said to King David. And King David said, well, I'd make him repay four times over. And with that, Nathan said, you're the man. You're the man. And the story of the of the poor family got true to him, and David confessed, and David made right as well as he could the incidents in his life. So maybe this was how come Jesus decided to use parables to tell his stories. And that one of the parables that he had to tell was, if you remember the scripture, he had been working with a lot of people that were sort of the riffraff of the community, and he really had spent a lot of time with them. Well, of course, the scribes and Pharisees who didn't like that, they began to murmur and they complained. And Jesus was going to have to talk to them about it, and how was he going to do it? Here he had the riffraff, and he wanted to help them. And then on the other hand, he had the scribes and Pharisees, and they needed help as well. Because you see, connected with these two types of people, there are the Pharisees, and the Pharisees thought that purity and perfection were the way that we got to God, that God had nothing to do with imperfection. And so they looked at God as the God of the Holy One of Israel, and they wanted everything to be perfect. And so when you get to God, when the judgment day comes, you know he's going to judge you on the basis of perfection and purity. Well, it turns out in the case of Jesus, Jesus has another way of looking at it. He sees God in a very different way. And so he wants to use the story to get through to the Sadducees and Pharisees, as well as to speak to the common, ordinary people that he was trying to speak to. And so what did he do? He told this story. He told this story about this man who lost one of his sheep. And he went out and he searched until he found it. And then when he found it, he came home and they had a big celebration over it. Well, then he went on, just to make sure that everybody understood, he told two more stories in that particular chapter. One was the story of the lady who lost a coin. She had 10 coins, but she lost one. And she searched and she searched until she found it. And then there was the story that he told about the prodigal son, the boy who went to his father and said, Father, I want what belongs to me. I want to go out and serve my world. And so he talked to his father, and his father gave him a third of the estate. And he went out, and it didn't take long before he blew it. And then he decided he'd come home. And when he came home, well, he expected that he would be treated very ugly, that people would challenge him for what he had done. But when his father saw him off in the distance, his father immediately ran to him, and he didn't castigate him. He didn't find fault with him. He just told him that he was happy he was there, and he had him put all kinds of good things on him. And they had a big celebration. They killed a calf, and they had a big celebration. Well, there was a second son, and he was a good boy. He always did things right. Well, when he came home and he saw that the younger one had come back and they were having a party, he began to sulk, and he stayed outside. He wouldn't come into the party. So his father had to go out, and his father had to listen to him as he complained and murmured and found fault and bitched about everything that was going on. But he said, hey, son, you know, everything I have is yours, and it's always been yours. You don't need to do anything to have love. And why did he tell these stories? He told these stories because he was trying to speak to the common guy who feels like he's not worth anything, that he's bad and he's not good. And then there's that group of us who think that we know what God's all about, and we believe in purity and perfection. And so when Judgment Day comes, what do? We think that when judgment comes, boy, don't worry, you're going to get in big trouble, because God's a God of perfection and purity. Well, Jesus had a new concept of God and a new concept of Judgment Day. And his idea of Judgment Day was that when the sheep got lost, when judgment came and the sheep was finally found, he didn't get castigated. He didn't be told that he was doing the wrong thing. It says that the master picked him up and put him on his shoulder and loved him and took him home. And when they got home, the second part of judgment in Jesus' idea was they had a celebration. Everybody got happy and they had a celebration. And he tells these other two stories which say the same thing to us, that if we want to understand what God is like and what Judgment Day is really going to be like, we need to see it in the way Jesus saw it, not in the way the Sadducees and Pharisees see it. And yet most of us, we look at Judgment Day as a day when the judgment of God is going to come down on us because we're not good enough. We're not being the kind of people we ought to be. And yet Jesus, when he sees Judgment Day, he sees it as when the lamb is found and he's put over his shoulders and he's caressed as he brings him back into the fold. And then they have a big celebration. And he did that for the coin, and they did that for the lost son, and even for the other one. Because there's always two kinds of people. There's the prodigals who want it their way, and they go out and live their kind of life, and they use up all their resources. And then there's the scribes and the Pharisees, and they want to live it right, the older brother. They want to do it right, but they're doing it for the wrong reason. They're not doing it because they love God. They're doing it in order that they will not face a judgment day. And so Jesus tells this story to get at people's lives and help them to understand something about where they were. Now the question this morning is, these stories are not only true for way back then, they're true for you, and they're true for me. And what do we learn in these stories? Do we see ourselves in the face of the scribe and Pharisee, or do we see ourselves in the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the prodigal son? Which are we? We get to choose. We get to look at ourselves and we get to make a decision. I'm glad for the new insight that I have about what Judgment Day is going to be like according to Jesus. It's going to be a time of celebration. It's going to be a time of healing and getting well and knowing that life is okay because God is on your side. Wow, what a truth. I'm praying that that truth will become a part of your life this morning as you continue to look at your life and realize that Jesus has a judgment day that's going to grace you and love you and help you. I pray that you'll really experience this in your life today. God bless you.